Yes, and now let's move to, talk about Bersih, and I mean, Bersih is, Bersih is a marvel. If you look at how Bersih moved from being a street movement, of rallies, and now through the years, through the 15 years that Bersih has been operating, you see how Bersih has moved from street rallies and organizing that into being able to talk about institutional reform, in being almost a think tank, for the country and being the voice of conscience. And, Thomas has been involved with Bersih throughout that period of time, and he has been chairman of Bersih 2.0 since 2018. And we are so glad to be able to talk to Thomas this morning, to share his thoughts on what is Bersih's current challenges and what's in the road ahead for Bersih. Thomas, over to you.
Okay, so I figured the best way to sum up, what Bersih is doing is to actually go to the campaign that we just launched 3 days ago called Ketuanan Pengundi. So let me just open up that slide right now so that we can run through some of the key areas of reform that Bersih is currently focusing on right now. Okay, so Ketuanan Pengundi basically is a summation of what we have been doing since the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government. Prior to that, during the Pakatan Harapan government, our focus was to focus on the manifesto of the new government then, because many of the advocacy that Bersih pushed for can be found within those promises. And we were busy with engagement and pushing them and issuing statement when there is compromise or non-fulfillment of those things. And we were busy for that 22 months. But with the sudden collapse of the PH government during Sheraton move, obviously the manifesto is tak boleh pakai lagi. So we have to go back and ask ourselves, what then are the important issues right now? Obviously, with what happened at Sheraton move, we ask ourselves, how did this happen? Why did it happen? And what can we do basically to fix the problem, fix the problem that arose. So we began to, in this 1.5 years since the Sheraton move, began to commission research papers into areas that we have identified as weaknesses or loopholes that allow party hopping or encourage party hopping, and also basically the putting aside of voters' right and the voice of voters. So in this 1 year over, we have commissioned so far about 17 research papers, which you can find on our website and download them, the full report. These are not purely academic, because though May, you mentioned we are like a think tank. We are not a think tank, we are first and foremost an advocacy group. But in our advocacy, we need to have depth. We need to understand what we are pushing for, why we are pushing for, and we look at the best practice from around the world. So that's the gist of the research report we have, and every one of them come with recommendation for Malaysia. So with all this background, we decided to put together an overarching campaign to bring it now to the rakyat of Malaysia. We have been engaging in the research, talking to politicians from both sides, getting their views, their inputs on what is workable, what is not workable. And we benefited a lot because we understood the political process and political mindset a little bit better. And so we incorporated in our recommendation some of the doable reforms needed. So now the campaign, Ketuanan Pengundi, is really to bring it to the public. And our intention with this campaign, which we aim to run until the next 2 years or until GE15, is basically to get the public on our side on these important campaigns, reforms that will basically strengthen the democratic structures of Malaysia. So let me just run through the six demands of Ketuanan Pengundi and what they stand for. The first one is don't suppress our votes. And it talks about basically under this umbrella, don't suppress our votes, EC reform, because the EC really need to be an independent and free institution, because it is the institution that basically conduct elections to choose who will govern Malaysia for 5 years. And we can't have an institution that is controlled by the current executive. Many of the laws existing basically allows the Prime Minister to determine how the EC runs itself. So that has to change. Then it's also talk about Undi 18, which has been so wonderfully championed by Tharma and Kira and the team in Undi 18, and really taking it from beginning to where we are right now, and likely fulfillment and beyond even. So this is something that we are so glad to work with Undi 18 and support all their efforts together with automatic voter registration, and also the expansion of absentee voting. Now, who are we talking about? We're talking about Sabahan and Sarawakian, who due to work opportunities and education have relocated to live here, but not because they want to be here, but because of the opportunities here. But yet when it comes to voting, they vote back in their kampong, back in Sabah and Sarawak. But the current situation is that they have to fly back at their own cost to cast that one vote, each one costing about probably 2,000-3,000 just to make that return trip there. Now, that need not happen if the EC were to give them absent votee right, and then organize advanced voting for about 500,000. We are guesstimating here, 500,000 Sabahan and Sarawakian who are here. Advanced voting, 3 days advance in big voting center where they can cast their vote for their constituency, and then this will be back and sent back to their constituency returning officer to be counted on the polling day together with the rest of the votes. Now, what does this advanced voting center look like? It looks like the current PPV for vaccination, where thousands and thousands of people are processed, with their IC and everything. It can be done, they must. So we want the EC to think about it. Then there are others, overseas Malaysian, between 1 to 2 million. 1 to 2 million eligible Malaysian, but the last election, less than 8,000 registered for voting, and that's a crying shame. So that represents a suppression of vote. And also workers in Singapore, Kalimantan, South Thailand, and Brunei, they need to have better access to voting. So that is number one. Number two is stop party hopping. Now, I think you can ask every Malaysian, every one of us really had enough of this, and we can see the devastation brought about by party hopping when it's done in bulk. What happened at PRU 14 or GE 14? Don't forget, the first wave, big wave, happened right after Pakatan Harapan won government, where a lot of UMNO MPs jumped to Bersatu. Now, that was wrong. I think many of us in civil society issued statement, condemned the thing, and said this is unacceptable, but very few people listened then. But when it happened 22 months later, during Sheraton move, we were outraged, rightly so. But don't forget, this is a fundamental. It doesn't matter who it happened to, it is wrong. It is a betrayal of voters' mandate. So we need a solution. So the solution has to be some sort of anti-hopping law or mechanism. And after our study and consultation, Bersih's position is that recall election is a better mechanism to deal with the problem of party hopping, simply because party hopping is not a simple black and white issue. We always think of party hopping as bad, but there are those who leave their party for good reason, on principle. Before GE14, when Muhyiddin and Shafi Aldar left, was sacked by Najib, we say it was good. They spoke up, it was principle. That was a good thing, And so we have to think that it's not a black and white. So we need a mechanism that allow the voters, who better than the voters who elected this MP in the first place, to decide whether to recall them or to keep them, So recall election is something that now YB Azalina is championing, and we are supporting her in that process. The third thing is make our parliament work. And with the recently signed MOU, which I'll be talking a little bit about afterwards, this is one of the big reforms. And I would say that if you ask me, give me one reform, if I can only choose one, I would say parliamentary reform is the big one, because it is the one of the three branches of government, apart from the executive, the judiciary, the legislative, parliament is the big one. And I can tell you, current laws, current practices, the parliament is nothing more than a rubber stamp to the prime minister and the cabinet. And it is an insult to the voters like us that we spend all the effort to elect, choose our representatives, send them to parliament, and they can only shout at each other across the aisle and can't do anything else, like working together in select committees, like able to decide on their own budget, who they want to hire, how many research staff they need. They can't. They have to ask money from the prime minister, and this should not be. So this reform, parliamentary reform, is a huge reform, and we're so glad that it's now on the table in the MOU, and I think there is political will on both sides to make this happen. So we will be monitoring this very, very closely. Fourthly, the right to dissent is fundamental to any democracy. It can never be put aside or neglected or compromised in any way. And that is why in any push for stronger democracy, there must be a protection for the freedom of expression, protection for the freedom of association, and also for assembly. So fifthly, no double standard. Now, what do we mean by that? There has to be a reform in the judiciary justice system. The judiciary has to be independent, but we are now talking specifically about the issue of the Attorney General's office, because the Attorney General is also the public prosecutor. It's a one and same person. But the Attorney General is appointed by the Prime Minister to be the lawyer to the his government, to the King, and to Parliament. He is the lawyer for that. And yet, as a public prosecutor, he decides who to charge, who not to charge. And that's why one of the problems in Malaysian politics so far is the double standard that we see. You know, those who are with the government has immunity protection. Their case get dropped, they don't get charged. And even if the investigation paper, they are submitted to the Attorney General to decide whether to be charged or not. So we remember famously 1MDB, at the height of it, you know, the Attorney General, Gani Patel, was about to charge Najib for 1MDB, but he was sacked overnight. And Apandi was appointed, and Apandi famously said there's no case, and the whole thing was dropped. So that's how important it is. We need an independent public prosecutor. So we are calling for a separation of the office of the Attorney General and that of the public prosecutor. And this need to be done, one of the main things. And lastly is give taxpayers a voice. So this is an area that Tharma mentioned just now as well, that local democracy, the local council elections, these are the grassroots democracy that has been suspended since 1964. And there has not been, it was in the early days of the formation of Malaysia, local council election was a normal thing because it just makes sense. We are paying rates, you know, yearly rates to our local council to look after our area, from the rubbish collections and security and everything, lighting, and yet we have no say in how they are run, who are our local councillors. So we are pushing for a return to local democracy, and I'm sure Jeffrey will be talking more about it just now. So with that, I will just stop sharing.